Thanks for being here today. It is a pleasure to be talking with you this night. So I know today we are going to learn a lot about you and your career, and this is going to be really interesting for us.
Good to be here.
As I have said in my previous introduction, you are a referent in cosplay and props industry. And talking about this, I know that all professions have their difficulties and necessary skills. But for me, in your business, you need to have the whole pack. I mean, knowledge in several areas as sculpting, painting, 3D design, drawing. Do you think that experience is essential in your profession?
Oh yeah, I guess in any profession, experience is helpful. The more you get, and at some point, hopefully you master your field. I've been doing this for roughly 35 years, so gained a lot of experience. Plus, knowing who to work with, it's most definitely your team. You know, as they say, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Just to have all your pieces together, all your people you've worked with, you get the relationships, the rhythms. And then hopefully the trust in the whole unit as they trust me to help kind of guide the process. But everybody plays a part in what we build here.
Yeah, and also you have seen the transition between old films in which there were only one hero and one villain, and nowadays in which you have several of them in the same film. So how has this affected to your workload and overall to the deadlines?
Yeah, I guess it grew that way, right? So in the beginning, you did have one or two characters, and you had 8 months to a year to build these things. And the films came every year or two, you'd have one film. But as the process got more, I guess, worked out, and you thought, oh, maybe it's going to get easier because now we understand how to do it. They would add more characters. You're like, okay, no, it's just as crazy. And then you work that out with new processes, with digital, and just now you have the rhythm, and then they start taking away time. So now, instead of having 8 months, we have 3 months. Instead of having 2 characters, you have 4 or 5, or it just keeps growing. So it's difficult to catch a breath. You're always having to try to figure out how to make these things happen. And at some point, we always talked about, at some point it's going to fail. There's not enough time to do what they're asking for. Sometimes it doesn't come out as great as you hoped. And what they see in my history, if they're coming to me, the things I've done, they want that. But they're not willing to give me the time or sometimes money to do it. And sometimes that question comes up, like, why isn't this as good as it could be? Well, because you didn't have enough money.
I understand. So, and normally, how many people work in the same project? Do you work as a team or as an individual?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, we have anywhere from low end 20, high end maybe 30, 35 people here, depending on how large the show is, or if we're doing multiple shows. A lot of times we'll do 2 or 3 projects at a time, kind of schedule them out, because not everything, everything's kind of different deadlines or different projects. So some people want one suit and that's all we're doing. Some people want 5 different characters. So it varies. Just trying to keep the shop going, keep people busy, and keep without the money we don't keep the lights on. So trying to continue to work through everything we can,
because there are different stages in the same project.
Yeah, so we'll start at the beginning, which is usually digital and measurements, and then it moves through the shop, and eventually we're into molds and casting. So now digital is available. So then we'll start again another project and move it through the system. So yeah, every project goes through the system at different times, so we can kind of just schedule through it. Sometimes it gets harder than you'd like. Other times it's a little more natural. It depends.
Yeah. And this is a personal question for you. How important is the role of the cosplay and props in the film? I mean, do you think that a bad cosplay work can ruin the whole experience for the audience and maybe for the fans of the film?
I guess, well, the term cosplay, I guess that's comes from, from my understanding, is people that emulate and make costumes that look like films. So that whole industry is blown up. When I was growing up, there was no such term. It was just, if you like something, you made a version of it, but there was nothing called cosplay. But now there is this whole movement of cosplay, people emulating and making costumes that they've seen on film they want to dress up like. So that's interesting. It's a whole new world, and I'm not really, to be honest, I don't follow it or don't know much about it. Once in a while, I'll see somebody build something. I'm very impressed with what they can do by themselves, which usually we have a team of people building things. So it's pretty impressive what people can do given the time. They have probably endless amount of time and they just work, tirelessly to make that image, which is it's cool. But I don't know much about that world, to tell you the truth.
And do you think that apart from being a good actor or actress, it's important to create a kind of relationship between, for example, the costume or the prop and the person who is going to wear it?
Well, I think if you have the right costume, wardrobe, it can add richness to it. It'll empower that performer for sure. Some actors are just great actors and they can act through a paper bag. But other people, I think it never hurts to have something built to a certain level. It just kind of gives you that presence. It definitely, I think, helps in the whole process for sure.
And let me talk about the difference between making and producing an invented creature versus making something more human. How is the general approach to both characters?
Creature work?
Creature work versus a human character, for example, of a hero.
Well, I mean, to be honest, most creature work I think is silly. I mean, they base it on, because to break the rules, you need to know the rules. And a lot of people design creatures that don't really know anatomy or how things actually function. So they just make these, I guess, fantasy, which to me is silly. But if you know animals, anatomy, real life creatures, and base it in that world and then tweak it, that's the most successful. But most of the times people just try to invent without really even having an understanding of what they're doing. So to me, it just looks like noise. But once in a while you get somebody who knows what they're doing and it's impressive. But for the most part, it's kind of goofy, I think.
And talking about this, I think that digital design is essential in your industry, but which do you prefer? Traditional work, by hand, or digital is definitely better than the traditional kind of work?
Well, I think they all have a place. When digital started really becoming in vogue, which is, I don't know, started 15, 20 years ago when people started using it, and it was terrible. It was terrible. Nobody liked it. It was always just pulls you out of the experience. Yeah. And from my mind's eye, I think the first time they captured it was, I think, Jurassic Park was the right blend of practical and digital, because they had both. They had some practical full-size pieces, and then they had a lot of digital, but they did it very artfully. They did a lot of stuff in the dark with rain. It worked. It was and also the talent, because it took a while for the talent to catch up to the digital, meaning in the beginning, digital was very technical. So you had technical people who weren't artists. So the stuff looked terrible. It maybe kind of worked, but it was terrible. And it was a rudimentary tool. But now things have gotten so much more advanced. They have artists that are able to navigate these systems now. So the artists bring a lot to it. And a lot of it now it's the same as an instrument, or it's a tool. So I always say, if you give me a guitar, it's useless. I'll just make noise. Just strumming noise is nothing. But if you give somebody who knows how to play a guitar, it could be beautiful, powerful, all that. So it's a tool. So just because you have a computer doesn't mean it's going to be good. So if you have the right person wielding that tool, you could have something that's flawless and amazing. And if the wrong person, it just looks clumsy and it's awkward and overdone. It's like anything. So I think it's a great tool, especially now that it's just more and more user-friendly. When in the beginning, it was all bad, especially when non-artists were using that tool because it was novel, it was new. But now it can be seamless. It's amazing, if you know what you're doing. Again, you have to know what you're doing. Otherwise, it's just a clumsy thing. Hitting a nail with a screwdriver is really not going to do much. You got to use the right tool.
I think your example of the guitar is perfect for this question. And talking about more technical aspects, when you are in the painting stage, do you try different light situations in order to see how colors look? Or this is something that is mended next in digital post-pro in the film?
mean, the colors, well, we're usually working with designers and they dictate what that looks like. They take our color samples and they'll film test them to see how it reacts on film, and then we get feedback. So yeah, they do testing. We usually are working with them and they dictate what they want to see from us, and we try to fulfill that. But yeah, then it is film tested to see, because different lighting, different film, different equipment will react differently. So that's correct.
Yeah, I was thinking in shadows or plenty of light. So
yeah, so some films are going to be shot very dark, and they tell us that and try to accommodate, and then they'll film test it and say that worked or didn't because of this. So then we adjust to get there. But we have to trust in them, because we're usually a vendor for a designer or a producer or somebody else.
And just curiosity, I have listened so many times that to make a perfect chrome plated is really difficult overall, depending on the surface, because it peels. And do you agree, or maybe it is so easy for you?
Well, chrome finish, I mean, it's a process. There's a few different ones that are being used these days. But basically, like you said, it's all about the prep, the surface. The more perfect your surface is, the better your outcome will be. If you don't prep properly, any kind of imperfection will show. And also, if it's not quite dead smooth, glass smooth, perfect, you're not going to have the reflectivity. So if you have a perfect base, and then you do your next steps properly, it can be pretty brilliant. But if one of those steps gets missed, then it becomes gray paint or silver paint. It's not like a reflective chrome. It just takes practice, laying it down, materials, but it's all about process. It's prep. The paint part is really quick. I mean, it's very quick. It's the prep that takes time.
Yeah. And when you do, for example, a helmet, do you have to make some spare parts or different materials version of each helmet or costume?
Again, it dictates film, or the scenes will dictate if it needs to be modular, come apart, or it's all in one shot, or how it's being used. Yeah, if it's heavy stunts, we might make a soft version. Most of the time, they'll be a little more rigid and firm, so they look great. And if it's a heavy stunt, we might make a soft version for that particular scenes. But usually the soft ones don't hold their shape as well. They don't look as good. But some films you need that. And other times it's just too dangerous, so they'll just replace it in post. They get our digital model and they'll just put it in after the film. That way it's safer, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on. And if it's done right, you don't even know it's being done.
And as I told you, my show is all related with 3D printing technology. So let me talk a little bit about this. And I know in Ironhead Studio, you use this technology as a tool to make your works. If I am right, you normally use SLS. Can you tell us about this? How do you use SLS in your works?
So yeah, we use all kinds of different prints for sure. The SLS is the nylon composite, and that one is very, very durable. So that we use a lot for helmets, basically for helmets. It's very durable, but it's also very rough. It's like a sand casting.
Yeah.
It's very crude in a way where the surface, I mean, they're getting better and better, but still needs a lot of finish work. So then that's when a lot of the people we have here are very, the craft level is very high. So they can take those helmets and make them perfect. So if you need something printed much more high resolution or detail, you need to do SLA. Or a different type of print where you have all the detail and you mold and cast. Or we'll do an SLS for structure, and then we can add the other pieces on top for dressing for more detail. But structurally speaking, the SLS is what we use for most of the helmets we do now.
Yeah. This was another question, because nylon, it is a rough material. I think you use this only as a base, but next you have to work a lot over it, sanding and other stages, because this is a difficult material.
Yeah, but we can also use it as a finished detailed helmet. It just takes a lot more finish work. And again, having the right people who can do that.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not something you just do. It's a lot of experience. Some of these people here that do that have been doing finish work for many years, and they're not just doing it, but they're very good at it.
Yeah.
So they can take a helmet that's pretty rough and tune it so you wouldn't know that it started as a rough SLS part.
Yeah. And another technology I think you use great is 3D scanning. In which part of the process you use it, and why is this useful for you?
Well, scanning, you start with a scan because you get your performer. You can scan their heads, their body, all that. Back when I started, it was plaster. The bodies were plaster cast, bandage. You make 2 halves, you pour in plaster, you pull out a body, you clean it up, and it was it's almost next to impossible to get a body to stand perfectly in the right position for an hour. So they usually move. So it's kind of a lot of work post trying to get their body back into what you needed. And the heads are also, to me, not good because in a life cast, it's a light material. It's an alginate. It's like a dental impression type material you put on your face. And it takes all the detail, but also it pulls. So your face gets a little weighted. Lips, people sometimes purse their lips. They have a funny face. They pull their chin in. So it affects a lot of what you're going to get. You don't know it till later when you pull out your copy and you see if you have a good head cast or bad head cast, and it takes time. So they might have left your studio and now you realize you have a bad head cast. So you have to either do it again or work with what you got. So now scanning, we can scan them in a few minutes. You know if the scan is good or bad. And if it's not good, you scan them again so you get that right pose or the right features. And you can now scan with their eyes open, not because you can't do a life cast that way. So you scan, their eyes are open, their lips aren't affected, there's no weight, the pose is perfect. So it's just a much, much more accurate and less invasive. So you can scan somebody, head and body 15, 20 minutes. And that's all in. The actual scanning process is just a few minutes. And they're not, under all kinds of plaster and Vaseline and glues. And that's it's a couple of hour process. So it's much more evasive. And some people are claustrophobic, freaks them out. So it's just a much, much better way of doing things. And then you print out what you need. You mill out the bodies or you print out heads and you have very accurate representation of what they are. So it's a much, much better system. Now that the scanning equipment has gotten better. In the early days, the scanning equipment was very rough. So your outputs would be rough. But now, like a camera, cell phones have more megapixels than the high-end cameras. A couple of years ago, a high-end camera would have 30 megapixels or whatever. Now your phones have more than that. So everything's changing. So just getting more and more advanced, more and more user-friendly. So I don't think I'd ever go back to a plaster or life cast these days.
It is like a cloud of points, and also it is really organic with the expressions and also with the faces of the actor or actress.
Yeah.
And I know you have made several works out of film industry, and especially I think there is one of them that it is iconic, and it is Daft Punk helmets. Please tell me the story behind this. And also one more question. How do you feel when you know that your work is the key of the public image of a music group?
Well, that one, we didn't originate it, but we did work with them, and that was a good project. That was the movie Tron, I guess the newer Tron film. Mm-hmm. And we got the contract to do all the helmets for the film, and they were doing a cameo, so that fell under my umbrella. So we were going to reproduce the helmets for the film, mm-hmm. And so we got copies of the originals. They loaned them to us. They're iconic. The imagery is really unique and beautiful, but to be honest, they were really not the best crafted helmets. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
So what I did is I took them for what they were, and then I went and corrected some things. I left some things the way they were for charm and the way just their personality, but I did do some modifications, and then I made them the way I would make them. So long story short, when the first time we had fittings, they were a little like standoffish because we weren't the original people they're used to. Mm-hmm. But then when they finally put them in their hands, they just kind of changed.
Yeah.
They more or less said, wow, this is real. Like it was actual gold plated. They were chrome. They weren't like a synthetic. It was real materials. Mm-hmm. They felt real. The fit was perfect. It was very stable. they just fit and finish inside and out. So they couldn't dispute that. So after the film, they asked if I would take over and now build them for the future. I was like, absolutely. That was kind of part of my goal, was to do that, win them over, because I knew I could. Because for the original stuff, just imagery wise, it was strong, but it was just not well crafted. And I knew, I thought is once they had something that was of quality, they would understand it, and they did. So yeah, we became friends, and we worked together for a few years after.
Okay. And recently, the world has lived a pandemic, and in all this situation, Supermask is released in collaboration with you and will.i.am. Do you like new challenges and get out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always said this ever since I can remember. I love creating things, designing things, being a part of something. Film happens to be where I make a living, costumes, and it's a great challenge, and it's interesting because they're usually unique and new challenges for different materials. So I love that. But also I love kind of any challenge. So I've designed stuff for cars. I've designed homes, interiors. I've designed, and with Will, I worked with him in the past, and he came to me early on in the pandemic, and he wanted just a mask personally. He just wanted something cool. So I said, yeah, we can make something. So we produced one for him. And I thought, well, it'd be great if it had air movement, because I hate wearing them because they're hot. I said, well, if I create something with fans, you could breathe better. So he said, okay. So we made one. And once he wore it, he thought, well, this could be something other than just what we're making. So then we decided to partner up and produce this thing. At this point now, I think it's over. The pandemic has waned and the interest is gone, but we made something. It was pretty interesting to see this product that we conceptualized and now a real living thing. It was pretty great. So now from time to time, I get other people asking me to develop things for them. I'm working currently with Jose Cuervo, I worked on a packaging and a new bottle for them, and now I'm working on another side project. So they're asking me to develop iconic imagery, and I can't explain exactly what I'm doing, but I'm doing stuff with them as well. So it's fun. Yeah, I like producing and doing things regardless of what it is. To me, I think the idea of, I guess in old Europe, the masters, when everything was designed, buildings, forks, spoons, and in America, the Industrial Revolution in the 40s, when you had a fan that goes on top of your desk. It was beautiful. It's still beautiful. And now you have these ugly plastic fans. And now we're starting to get back to it, which is great, because there's no reason why something needs to be ugly or clumsy when you can design it. So I really think that's important. And to me, I thought that's one reason I'm put here, is to help maybe bring some of that aesthetic into the world, whatever it is. If it's costumes, if it's cars, if it's blenders, whatever. I enjoy bringing whatever my viewpoint is into that space. So yeah, I enjoy it. Doesn't necessarily need to be defined by any particular thing or medium.
Yeah. This is good for an artist to get out of the comfort zone always, because you can reach new goals and new aims that you didn't think about it. And maybe this is a difficult question, but feel free to answer what you want. Do you think that film industry gives all the importance it deserves to the professional that, as you, put all your effort in every movie? Because I think that general public sometimes they don't even know the artists that are behind every costume, so they see on films. So what do you think about this?
No, of course not. We're especially wardrobe, as they call it. I guess they can't let you know how important it is, because then you might demand more money or command more money or prestige. So they just keep you down. And it's just the way it is. The stronger the unions get, the more you, I guess, can rise, then they have to acknowledge it and pay in kind. Because I remember early on when I was working on the early Batman films, the one, I think Keaton, Kilmer, obviously I did the Ben one. The early Batman films, I remember back then, I think the box office was $500 million, which is a lot of money. but then I heard the merchandise was over 1 billion. So the toys, the pajamas, the lunch boxes were more than the tickets. And that was all the imagery that I touch, or people like me touch. So that's very important, but nobody knows about me. I mean, there's a few people know, but for the most part, not so much. So the stuff that we help create, the imagery, is just as important as anything. You know, it's part of the experience, part of the film. It's part of what people gets excited about, why they want to do cosplay, why they buy, you know, some people get tattoos of imageries that we work on.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important, but no, the industry doesn't kind of thank you in kind. I make a decent living, but it's not, I don't think it's equal to what we bring to the table. But then again, if I really care, if it was really bothering me, I guess I would protest and go towards it. But at this point, you know, I make a decent living and I enjoy what I do. And, you know, there you go.
This is the most important part. And we are reaching the end of the interview. Recently, I saw that ironheadstudio is selling ultra-realistic masks on the website. Could you tell me something about this project?
Yeah, so the mask project was actually something I came up with. I think it was near COVID time or something. We were slow, and I thought, let's do something fun. And to me, what it was, when I was a child, and Halloween, it's a big, I don't know if it's big where you live, in America it's big. Halloween, you dress up once a year and get candy. I know. But in the case, you could get dressed up. And there was these masks you could buy at the local drugstore, and they were just vacuum formed, they did a quick vacuum form. They had a rubber band, paint, eyes were open, and you put them on. They were fun. Batman, whatever, a witch. And you put on the silly little plastic mask. But I remember the experience, and it was really fun. So I thought to myself, when we were coming up with some ideas to just do some creative outlet, I thought, what if we created a version of that for now? Like my mind's eye as a child, that memory was pretty cool. But what if I did it in my brain or my abilities? So they're usually half or 3/4 masks that you could wear like that. It's a strap. It's simple. You can wear them. You can take them off. And the other bonus to it, it's like art. When you're done, you can hang it on a wall. So you can have it, like people buy masks of different cultures and you make a little display.
Chinese, for example.
Yeah, so it's kind of a fun, collectible. To me, it was a creative outlet, something to do and just have fun with characters and just have other friends or artists weigh in on it and just kind of just do something just creative. That's what it was for. It was kind of just something to do when we had a moment. Now we're busy again, so we don't really do much of it. But it was just some moment in my time, in my life, where I said, let's just have some fun, go back to my childhood. What would this be in my modern day head? That's what it was for. Yeah.
And you are an artist who has lived how the industry has been changing over the time. If you think about the future, what big changes do you think we are going to see? Or maybe you think that all the making processes are stabilized and they are not going to change a lot?
No, everything changes for sure. I think the way it is it's all money driven for sure. So long as people like me are useful, we'll be hired. But I think the idea and the goal is to get less people, right? So more, I guess, control too. People don't like making decisions, so the more they can make them later, mañana, they do. So you can do a makeup or a costume later and just put it on. The actor doesn't have to be bothered by wearing things. A lot of actors actually don't even like wearing stuff, so they want to be comfortable. Some actors want to be in it, and that's part of what they want. So, but a lot of people don't like being uncomfortable and having to sweat, so they'd just rather do it in post. So I think it's going more and more that way. People want to be comfortable, and plus the amount they need to produce is just so many different things. So the more digital becomes more, I guess, affordable and more easily, I guess, achieved, I think people like me eventually are going to go the way of the dodo bird, which to me it'll time out well, because I think at some point I'll retire and then they can do what they want. But then it'll be, then it's already is. Digital's huge, so then that's the market you'll be in, making digital costumes and monsters, and it's all going to be virtual. And then eventually actors will become digital. I think it's going to go that way eventually. And then you don't have to pay residuals to an actor because it's just a fake digital character. I think eventually, I mean, my lifetime, we'll see, maybe not, but I think it's definitely not going to stop. They're going to continue trying to figure out how to get more profits out of whatever they're putting in. It's just the way it is.
And now, as a little game, I'm going to give you some opening lines, and you have to answer with the title of a film you have worked in. For example, the most ambitious for you.
I don't know. We'll see. I might not be very good at this game, but go ahead.
And the most creative?
The most creative? Bicentennial Man.
Mm-hmm. And the most iconic for you?
Probably Catwoman, Michelle Pfeiffer.
And finally, one of your favorite ones?
Oof. That one is I have to answer differently every time because there's so many, but I'm just going to go with Black Panther.
Yeah. To end the interview, for the people who are going to see this interview and their dream is to work in this industry, could you please give them any advice?
I think, like I say, when you try to boil this down, the only answer, I guess, question or answer to the nut or trying to get into this world is just sacrifice and hard work, selflessness. You have to devote yourself to a point where it's almost crazy. I think, and also if you listen to people, you probably will never make it. Or if you're worried about people's opinion, because most things are impossible, or especially if you say they're impossible, you're right, they are. But if you want it and believe it harder than the next person, it's possible. I had little to no education, definitely no training. I did it in my bedroom for myself and then learned on the job through other artists and just learned that way. So there's a lot of different ways of getting there. Most of my art teachers said, don't bother, you're never going to make it, because they tried and they fell back on teaching, which is nothing wrong with it. But early on, I realized if I want to be a teacher, I'll ask you how to be a teacher, because that's what you know how to do. You don't know how to become an artist in the world of what I want to do. So I'm not going to even bother listening or asking. I know it's possible, so that's where I'm going. So I believed it more than anybody, and I have to, because that's who's going to do the work is you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are discouraged easily, you might as well give up now. You have to believe it to a fault where no one else, it doesn't matter what anybody says or believes, that's where I'm going. And also money wasn't the driving factor. If it is, it's kind of heartless and soulless. I think the art is what drove me, and the ability that God gave me, I didn't want to waste it. So I practiced and practiced and practiced and figured out how to utilize the skills I was given. And then eventually they did return money. You know, I'd make a living at it, but it wasn't the driving force. There's other ways of making money. It was about doing art, creating things. Mm-hmm. That's what satisfied me. And if that's what drives you, then you should push and push and drive. And I thought also if I didn't make it, at least I tried. I would be happy doing something in the art world. I didn't want to just do something to make a living because I knew that was going to crush my soul. So everybody's built differently. And that's my thing. There was no other choice. It was art or bust. So there was no other option. And I didn't really listen to people who told me otherwise. I just knew they didn't know how to do it. So I wasn't going to listen to them anyways.
Really inspirational.
That's a long-winded answer. I'm not sure where it went.
Really inspirational piece of advice. And finally, before closing this interview, can I see closer one of the helmet you have in your back, please? For example, Loki helmet.
Oh, up there. Yeah.
Can you take it, please, for me?
Yeah.
Oof.
So that's, there we go.
This is like a memory for me for the rest of my life. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and that's SLS. So that's been worked and polished.
Mm-hmm. So, Jose, one more time, thank you so much for your time. I hope you like it, this interview. And for people who wants to follow your work, can I say any social media or probably your website?
Probably the Instagram is the most, I guess, the one we keep up the most on. Yeah, the Instagram, the Ironhead. I would try that one for sure. And I enjoyed the interview very much. I appreciate the time you spent with me.
Okay, so thank you so much and goodbye.